Okay, so let's talk about Donald Trump, right? He's been arrested, right? And the indictment against him has been unsealed. So essentially, you have 37 counts against him. The majority of those 31, I believe, are Espionage Act. So in total, he's looking at 400 years in prison. Right, and the other charges are conspiracy and obstruction of justice. Right, so just in a nutshell, basically Donald Trump, when he left the Oval Office, when he was no longer president, he took boxes full of photographs, memorabilia, souvenirs, documents, and a lot of those documents were marked classified and top secret. The National Archive, they contacted Trump and his lawyers, and they said, you need to hand over these documents. And then he did, right? And this is, I'm telling you what is alleged in the indictment, okay? And I'll show it to you in a second here. So, they're saying that Trump did hand over some documents, but not all of them, because they have a list of these things, and they said, well, this are missing. And then, basically, this went to a grand jury, right? And they subpoenaed him for the documents, and he ignored it. And then they raided his house, and then they found more documents. And when I say his house, I'm talking about the Mar-a-Lago club that he has in Palm Beach in Florida. Okay, and you saw these infamous photographs like this one here that the FBI took when they raided his house. I mean, I don't know if this was actually as exactly as they found it, or if they had like neatly. Although neatly is kind of an oxymoron here, but if they had purposely laid out the documents to kind of show how Donald Trump was carelessly storing them and so on, I have no clue. But this is the idea, right? This is the image that they're trying to foster here, that he kept these things recklessly, and they were in his basement, and that because Mar-a-Lago is a club, they have movie premieres, they have dinners, they have like 150 people just working there alone, 150 people. So the Secret Service, because he's a former president, they have to protect him. If you're president, you're also banned from driving for the rest of your life, because you don't have the necessary technique and skills to evade some potential assassin or whatever, right? My point is that you continue to receive protection by the official Secret Service. And he never told them that he had these documents in the house. So the point here that they're trying to convey is that he not only took the documents, he not only refused to hand them over, he also stored them in such a careless manner, right? At a place where you had tons of people, visitors, tens of thousands of people coming there for events or staying there. So hypothetically, anyone could have accessed these things or potentially accessed them. That's what they're trying to convey here. So they say here on January 17th, this is from the indictment. Okay, it's like about 41 pages long. They say on January 17th, nearly 1 year after Trump left office, and after months of demands by the National Archives and Records Administration for him to provide all missing presidential records, Trump provided only 15 boxes, which contained 197 documents with classification markings. Then on June 3rd, in response to a grand jury subpoena demanding the production of all documents with classification markings, Trump's attorney provided the FBI, so the Federal Bureau of Investigation, 38 more documents with classification markings. Then on August 8th, pursuant to a court-authorized search warrant, the FBI recovered from Trump's office and storage room at the Mar-a-Lago Club 102 more documents with classification markings. Now you can see here, by the way, they mentioned Trump's co-conspirator. This indictment is United States versus Donald Trump and Nauta, I'm not quite sure how to say his surname, but basically this guy was in the United States Navy, and Trump was using him essentially as a valet, as they refer to in the indictment as a body man. He's basically like a personal aide. It's really that simple. And they're basically saying that both of them obstructed justice, and because he was Donald Trump's personal aide, that perhaps Donald Trump conspired with him to do this, right? That's the point here. And then, of course, up here they allege also that, they allege that Trump endeavored to have his attorney lie to the FBI, right? Falsely represent to the FBI and grand jury that Trump did not have documents called for by the grand jury subpoena. So they're basically saying that Trump told his lawyer to lie to the FBI. And then that Trump also directed his personal aide, Waltine Nada, to move boxes of documents to conceal them from Trump's own lawyer, the FBI, and the grand jury. They also alleged that Trump suggested that his attorney hide or destroy documents called for by the grand jury subpoena, and et cetera, right? So this thing is quite long, and I read through it, and I have several things to say about this. In Washington, D.C., when they say classified, this could mean literally anything. This could mean, as they're suggesting in the news, there was, battle plan attacks against Iran, I think it was, or, they were saying Trump had documents relating to the nuclear program. I mean, to the nuclear weapons in the United States, and to foreign maps and so on. I mean, that maybe that's true. The problem is, though, that a personal note, the description of, I don't know, a dinner that someone had eaten could be classified in Washington, D.C. There's a problem of what is called overclassification. Literally anything as trivial and as mundane and as boring as possible can just be stamped classified, and then suddenly it becomes a crime to disseminate it or possess it or so on. So you have to take with a pinch of salt, with a large pinch of salt, what they mean when they say classified. It could literally mean anything, because there is such a bureaucracy, there is such a habit, and this is the status quo in Washington, of classifying anything, no matter how trivial and dumb it is. So that, you have to take that into consideration, okay? Now, I wanted to show you what Trump said after being arrested, because you have to keep in mind, when he was arrested, right, it was not what you might think of arrest when it comes to somebody else, right? If this was somebody less privileged than Donald Trump, they would have had their passport taken away. That is not the case with Donald Trump. He's allowed to keep his passport. They did not view Donald Trump as a flight risk. Again, if this were somebody else, they would have been banned from leaving the state. So they have to stay in the state. They would not be allowed to leave the country. And as I mentioned first, they would have to hand over their passport. So you would have tons of restrictions placed on this person. And on Trump, this was not the case. So even though he was technically on paper, right, and of course they had to go down, they drove him down there. Even though he was arrested, he was literally out the next second, right? And to be honest, I think everybody is innocent until proven guilty. So obviously, if they think he did that, well, they need to prove it. But my point here is that Donald Trump definitely afforded a lot of privileges that somebody else would not be under the same charges. The other thing I wanted to say is that the Espionage Act, I mean, this is a political a piece of law, of legislation from the beginning, right? Donald Trump is not the first victim of the Espionage Act. As a matter of fact, he himself used it against Julian Assange, right? Who is a publisher. I mean, even Obama had trouble charging or indicting Assange because the guy's a journalist. So if you indict Julian Assange, you got to go after the Washington Post, and you have to go after the New York Times, and Spiegel and Le Monde, and every newspaper that has ever collaborated with him and published the documents that he disseminated. So Donald Trump he doesn't care, and he says, no, I'm gonna threaten him with 175 years in prison, right? So that's the case that as you guys know, I've been covering at large. So I know very, very well what the Espionage Act is. I'm very familiar with it, and it's kind of an really ironic. It's really ironic that Donald Trump used this against Julian Assange, and now he is being charged with the same Espionage Act and also threatened with like hundreds of years in prison. Not very nice, is it? Now, the thing is that Donald Trump, honestly, if in a nutshell, yeah, I think this is definitely politically motivated. You could view it as an attempt to stop him from running as for president in the 2024 election. The thing is, though, that I have a laundry list of crimes that Donald Trump should really be charged for, right? People talk about Vladimir Putin. Oh my God, the International Criminal Court has issued a warrant for his arrest because, you know, he's forcibly transferring children in Ukraine from Ukraine to Russia or whatever. You know, what about Donald Trump? Is the ICC going to go after him? Because I can name a bunch of crimes, right? Like he assassinated General Soleimani. And if you think that this is nothing or it doesn't mean anything, I want to ask you something. How would you feel if somebody assassinated the United States Secretary of Defense? You would be screaming bloody murder. You would want to nuke that person and their country. So what gives Donald Trump the right to assassinate General Soleimani, who is actually much bigger than a Secretary of Defense, if you actually know who he is and what he's done, right? He's a very prominent leader in the axis of resistance. So, this garbage that, oh my God, he's so evil, he killed U.S. troops. What the hell are U.S. troops doing in the region in the first place? Go home. Go home. You got no business being there. If you don't go there, nobody get killed. Don't start wars. Right? So this argument that Donald Trump and Mike Pompeo spouted, I'm like, oh my God, he's a terrorist. Go home. Mind your business. General Soleimani would be out of a job if he would just go home. He'd have literally nothing to do. He would be out of a job if you're so concerned, right? So Donald Trump, number one, he murdered someone. He assassinated someone on a diplomatic mission. Keep in mind, Soleimani was at the personal invitation of the Iraqi prime minister in Baghdad International Airport. So he was on a diplomatic mission. Okay, he assassinated someone who he assassinated Soleimani, putting sanctions on Syria, putting sanctions on Venezuela, putting sanctions on Iran. You know, each one of these things is its own crime. You know, people want to act like Donald Trump is some kind of angel, and you know, he never started a war. Well, he certainly continued the wars that were given to him. Does he have to start new wars to be, you know, to be evil? What about continuing wars? What about what he did in you know, in Iraq, with Afghanistan and with Syria and all of these covert operations with the CIA running around? What about that? Why doesn't he keep his own forces in check? Why doesn't he close Guantanamo Bay? Right? That's another thing. What about Guantanamo Bay? Torturing people is okay. So, you know, and sanctions, siege warfare, these are, in my opinion, and anybody who's sane and honest and objective, when you put sanctions on a country, it's like besieging them in the Middle Ages. You would surround a city and starve people to death. It's the same thing. It's literally the modern equivalent of that. So these are wars, in my opinion. When you sanction a country, you're declaring war against them, economic warfare. And then of course Julian Assange, I mentioned earlier. This is going to war with the press. Indicting a journalist with the Espionage Act, ironically. So how come none of this is mentioned? I think these are definitely crimes, and you can easily prove them. Honestly, I don't really care about Donald Trump keeping some quote unquote classified documents in his basement in Mar-a-Lago. I'm more concerned with him going to war with the press, starving people, depriving them of medicine, depriving them of food. Trying to coup the government in Venezuela, with this failed Bay of Pigs, this Bay of Piglets, trying to, attempting to overthrow the government in Venezuela. Yeah, these are really serious crimes. Why doesn't anyone in Washington, D.C. or MSNBC or CNN, why don't they talk about those crimes? You know why? Because they agree with this behavior. They would do the exact same thing. Where's the proof? Joe Biden is in power and he's doing the exact same things. He's still stealing oil from Syria, which is something that Donald Trump started doing, at least publicly, right? It's not giving a damn. It's like 40 containers. Just pump that oil, take it to El Wali border crossing, and off you go, or to the American bases. Why don't they talk about this, right? Because they're criminals just like him. So, just because Donald Trump is the victim of a political witch hunt doesn't mean that he's, absolved of actual crimes that he's committed. But in any case, I was waiting to show you all these videos before I go on my rant, but I've gone on my rant. So let's look at what Donald Trump had to say.
This is called election interference and yet another attempt to rig and steal a presidential election. More importantly, it's a political persecution like something straight out of a fascist or a communist nation. This day will go down in infamy, and Joe Biden will forever be remembered as not only the most corrupt president in the history of our country, but perhaps even more importantly, The president who, together with a band of his closest thugs, misfits, and Marxists, tried to destroy American democracy. But they will fail, and we will win bigger and better than ever before. Charging a former president of the United States under the Espionage Act of 1917.
I love how he's so shocked. He's like, I can't believe they would use the Espionage Act against me. Oh boy. These frivolous criminals. You used it yourself, man. Why are you so surprised? You don't like a taste of your own medicine? Huh?
Wasn't meant for this. An act for a crime so heinous that only the death penalty would do, and threatening me with 400 years in prison for possessing my own presidential papers, which just about every other president has done, is one of the most outrageous and vicious legal theories ever put forward in an American court of law. The Espionage Act has been used to go after traitors and spies. It has nothing to do with a former president legally keeping his own documents.
I mean, again, the irony here is too much for me to handle. You know, I will add something though, that the people that I'm about to show to you, I have a bunch of videos lined up. A lot of them are former Donald Trump, Trump administration officials. And you can see how they're all turning against him, right? Turning on him, stabbing him in the back, whatever you want to call it. You know, there are many ways to describe this kind of behavior. Donald Trump should have known, right? You put neocons and people like this, you know, in your entourage. Well, what do you expect? It is Washington, D.C. after all. But, you know, I have no doubt in my mind whatsoever that former presidents, Barack Obama, George Bush, whoever pick whoever you want, they all have classified documents. No question about it. No question about it. Mike Pompeo, who I'm about to play to you, this guy's goddamn suit is probably made of classified documents. Literally, right? It was made out of classified documents. And just listen to him speak, okay? Just listen.
And I've said this before with respect to the classified documents. Every one of us who ever served, I had thousands of classified documents in my possession over the 4 years in the executive branch and in Congress. We have a responsibility to handle them appropriately, and those of us who don't ought to be held accountable for that, no matter which party they're from. Biden's stuff in his garage next to his Corvette, or the documents that appear to have been down at Mar-a-Lago. When you make a mistake, you need to own it, Neil, and I hope that everyone who takes this sacred duty of protecting this information will do that.
You know, Chris Christie.
He's so funny. He's like, I'm all about, you know, the sacred duties toward the American peoples and stuffs, you know. God, man. I mean, this is Mike Pompeo. You know, he's lost a little bit of weight, so you might not recognize him, but there was a clip that I always play to you where he says, "We lied, we cheated, we stole," right? That's what he described his time at the CIA like, right? So hold on, let me pull this up. We lied, we cheated, we stole, right? He's kind of funny. He's really funny. He's like a cartoon character in my opinion.
When I was a cadet, what's the cadet motto at West Point? You will not lie, cheat, or steal, or tolerate those who do. I was the CIA director. We lied, we cheated, we stole. It was like we had entire training courses.
I'm sure you did. I'm sure you did. He's really like a cartoon villain. But you see, this is Donald Trump's CIA director, right? And then Secretary of State. And you see how they're all pulling the knives out. And I'm not exactly crying for Donald Trump. I really couldn't care less. But I am very aware of the the public skewering that they're giving him, and I'm pointing it out to you. You know, so there's his CIA chief. How about Vice President, Donald Trump's own Vice President? Right. This is Mike Pence. Take a look.
Look, no one's above the law, and we're all entitled to the presumption.
That's the problem, though,
of innocence.
That's the argument from the other side. Is that some people seems to be a two-tiered justice system. That's what the Trump supporters would say. Is there something to that?
Well, of course there is, Joe. I mean, we lived through it. I mean, we saw Hillary Clinton engage in this kind of behavior with regard to classified materials, and to be given a pass in 2016. We saw 2.5 years of the Russia hoax that now, thanks to the Durham report, we know is an investigation that should have never even been started. And we've seen a Justice Department that seems to have a two-tiered system of justice. None of that changes the fact, though, that the handling of classified materials is a very serious matter, not only from my years as vice president, but also my years on the International Relations Committee. And look, I had a chance to review the indictment over the weekend. And this indictment contains serious charges, and I cannot defend what is alleged.
Oh man, this is really something. It's really something, man. Here, let me show you Chris Christie. Now, all you need to know about Chris Christie is that Donald Trump once squashed him. You know, I remember I was watching the presidential debates, as I always did. You know, I've been doing since I was a child. But this one was from 2016, right? So this is when Donald Trump entered the race, and they were all on the debate stage, and you had the other Bush, Jeb, right, and Chris Christie, and I don't quite remember the joke. I just remember Donald Trump like demolishing them all, really crushing them, like making absolute mincemeat out of them, and Chris Christie was one of them. So I'm not surprised that he would hold a grudge. But let's listen to what he had to say, because now Mike Pence, who I just showed you, has Donald Trump's vice president, has jumped into the race all of a sudden, right? Maybe they see an opening. Oh, Donald Trump's going to jail. Okay, maybe I can, maybe it's my turn. Let's take a look at what Chris Christie had to say.
The conduct in there is awful. I mean, put aside taking the documents in the first place, but then when you start getting...
Just 1 second. I know I just let the man start, but he said the conduct in there is awful. You need to understand something about the U.S. Judicial system is that, conduct is a way for the prosecutor to kind of smear you and allege that you did something criminal without actually bringing a charge, right? So they might not have enough evidence for something, or the entire case, is something that is not really true. So in order to make you look like a criminal and make the charges stick, this is what they have. They have alleged conduct, which is like storytelling time. You sit the class down and you start telling them stories, or it's making things up. It could be anything. And given that this is also an Espionage Act case, as I covered with Assange's case, which is also Espionage Act, they had a second indictment that came out all of a sudden out of nowhere, and you have alleged conduct, and all this fantastical storytelling, this complete fantasy. So I just wanted to make that point, right?
Taking the documents in the first place. But then when you start getting asked, Anderson, in May of 21, nicely, with a letter from the archivist saying, could you please give them back? And you ignore it. Then they come with a grand jury subpoena. And then, according to the indictment, you tell your lawyers, tell them we don't have anything, even though you have dozens and dozens of boxes of material. That's obstruction of justice, if it's true. And so I think the former Attorney General is absolutely right. And look, I did this for 7 years in New Jersey. We did 130 political corruption prosecutions without a loss. What I could tell you for sure I know about that indictment is there's probably about a third of the evidence they actually have is in that indictment.
There's a lot more.
There will guaranteed be a lot more. When you're a prosecutor, you never put every card on the table before the trial. And so there's going to be a lot more.
As indictments, I mean, you've had a lot of experience with indictments. This one is very detailed.
It is. It's what we call in the business a speaking indictment. Because remember, when you're the prosecutor, you can't comment beyond what's in the four corners of that document. So I think that Jack Smith understood that the American people were going to need a fulsome explanation if you're going to bring an indictment against the former president of the United States, and I think he was right. So that is much more detail than you'd see in the typical indictment. But also, don't be fooled. There's a lot more information to come when they go to trial. Specifically, I think there are going to be a lot of witnesses who actually worked for Donald Trump who are now going to be testifying against him.
In the
Yeah, I mean, I have no doubt, right? It's once again, it's politics. It's dirty game. It's the dirtiest game of them all. Which again, I'm not crying for Trump, but it is what it is. Here's another one. I mean, you shouldn't be surprised at John Bolton being in this list, because he it's been long since since he turned against Trump. And you remember when Trump fired him, he went and wrote some book. And nevertheless, I'll play what he had to say.
Billion population. If he has anything like what the indictment alleges, and of course the government will have to prove it, then he has committed very serious crimes. This is a devastating indictment. I speak here as an alumnus of the Justice Department myself, because not only is it powerful, it's very narrowly tailored. They didn't throw everything up against the wall to see what would stick. This really is a rifle shot, and I think it should be the end of Donald Trump's political career.
He's obviously made clear he doesn't think that's going to be the case.
Well, for what it's worth, that's what John Bolton had to say. I mean, when you surround yourself with neocons. Let me play you Bill Barr, right? So this is Donald Trump's attorney general.
That's a different question. But when you think about somebody like President Obama or President Clinton, the sock drawer case with President Clinton, they'll point to these and say, listen,
so there are two big lies, I think, that are out there right now. One is, these other presidents took all these documents. Those were situations where they arranged with the archives to set up special space under the management, control, and security provided by the archivist to temporarily put documents until the libraries were ready. These were not people just putting them in their basement, okay? And the second thing that the president, this idea that the president has complete authority to declare any document personal is obvious. It's facially ridiculous. That opinion had to do with the distinction between official records, which are records prepared by government agencies for the purpose of government action, and personal documents as opposed to official documents, which are things prepared by the president, such as a diary or notes, which are not used in the government's deliberations. And yes, as to the second class, stuff that the president himself generates, the president has some discretion. But these are official documents. It's inarguable.
Yeah, once again, what does that mean, official documents? They classify anything. It could be a picture of a hamburger, and if it's marked classified, that's it. And, I'll just draw a distinction here. Joe Biden, they also found classified documents, and the matter of the fact is that Joe Biden was not the president at this time. These are from the time of his vice presidency, right? So he did not have the right to declassify or classify any documents, right? The president has that right. So if you're going to make this argument, then Trump does win, right? He was the president. He certainly was the president. The fact that we're supposed to believe like Hillary Clinton and with this whole email scandal, like she did everything by the book, and Bill Clinton never took any documents, and Barack Obama. Oh, come on, man. This guy, Bill Barr, Mike Pompeo, they probably got classified documents in their pockets, right? Oh, God, it's on the tip of my tongue. I forgot who this was. There was some guy, I swear to God, he tried stuffing classified documents in his pants and smuggling them out. Jesus, how the hell did I forget this guy's name? Hold on, I'll look it up in a second. But, my point here is that Donald Trump is guilty of many crimes. I'm not sure that this is one of them. There's definitely a political element to this. Does that mean we're going to cry for Trump? Absolutely not. All of these people that I just showed you are, they're just as corrupt. They're just as evil. Half of them were in his administration, right? So that speaks volumes. It doesn't absolve them of anything that now they're speaking against him. They just want to have, they just want to stay in the spotlight. And some of them, like Pence and Chris Christie, think that this is their opening. Like, okay, Trump is going away. Perhaps I better jump in the race. I mean, let me show you this clip here. This is from Tucker Carlson, and this video that he did went extremely viral, right? And he's basically outlining some of the points about how Trump made mistakes with he made a mistake with who he surrounded himself with and so on. Yeah, I mean, you're putting it a bit mildly. But there's this sentiment in Tucker Carlson's video that he's trying to like make this point that Donald Trump is somehow, he's separate from the establishment and he is completely different, and that's why they're going after him. No, he's not. He's not completely different. I just 10, 15 minutes ago, I was talking to you about a list of crimes that he did, murdering Soleimani, putting sanctions on Syria, putting sanctions on Venezuela, sanctions on Iran, depriving people of medicine, depriving people of their food, depriving people of their economic rights, their human rights, attacking the press, using the same Espionage Act, he's getting a taste of his own medicine, frankly, right? Using Espionage Act against Assange, going to war with the press, criminalizing national security journalism. How on God's green earth do you consider this being different from the Washington, D.C. establishment? He's not different. He's a loudmouth. That's it. That's the only way in which he is different. He just, he like in the Oval Office, he says, we're keeping the oil. We're taking the oil. Whose oil? It's not your oil. You're not the president of Syria. What are you doing in Syria? Stealing oil. You don't have the right to keep anyone's oil. Go home. Why are you trying to coup the government in Venezuela? Right? What about the embassy, the U.S. embassy that he moved to Jerusalem? So he's violating UN Security Council Resolution 242 and numerous others, right? That clearly say that Jerusalem is not the embassy Jerusalem is not the capital of Israel. Any annexation, which also happened, and any laws which passed by the Israelis called the Jerusalem Law. All of this is null and void. Israel has no jurisdiction in Jerusalem. Jerusalem is not the capital of Israel, period. And Trump violates this. And he goes also to the Golan Heights as well. So he's going to Jerusalem and the Syrian Golan Heights, which are occupied also by Israel and also illegally annexed by Israel. And he's saying this is Israel. Who are you to decide it's Israel? Based on what? You're violating your own, keep in mind, these UN Security Council resolutions, they were all the United States voted in favor or abstained in all of the cases. So they never try to block it, right? Like what Israel is doing in Jerusalem and the Golan Heights is so egregious. It's so bad. Even the United States State Department and White House couldn't condone it. They were like, no, we can't help you. You need to leave. You need to go, right? Or they abstained at the very least. So they basically let it through. They let it pass, right? They didn't block it or veto it. And Trump violates that. Gee, I mean, I'm running out of hands here trying to count the crimes, So, Donald Trump, I'm sorry, he's not a victim, and he's not innocent, and he's not, he never drained the swamp. He literally surrounded himself with swamp creatures. What do you call Mike Pompeo? What do you call John Bolton? These are angels? At best, Donald Trump is someone with very, very poor judgment who has no clue who to pick in his cabinet. And, just for that alone, he should never be in a position of power like president of the United States because he surrounds himself with people like John Bolton, like Mike Pompeo, and I don't give a rat's ass that they are stabbing him in the back. I care about their policies, right? How they are injuring and causing suffering to people in the United States and outside the United States. That's what Donald Trump did. He's no different than other presidents, and he's really just getting a taste of his own medicine. So yes, in many ways, Donald Trump is a victim of a political witch hunt. He's still, is he an angel? No, he's not an angel. And the fact that it's the Espionage Act and he used that against Assange, he is getting a taste of his own medicine. What do you want me to say? I don't like laughing at somebody else's misfortune. But, this guy, he caused so much suffering. He refused to pardon Assange. So he's like, screw this. I'm not going to do it. I'm going to pardon mass murdering, psychotic mercenaries from Blackwater who massacred civilians in Iraq. I'm going to pardon, criminals. But I'm not going to pardon the guy that I'm trying to prosecute, and throw in jail for 2 centuries. Well, how do you like it now? Not nice, is it? It's not nice.